What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of the Touchline Talk Show. Really good show in store for you, including our first interview on the Touchline Talk Show. That will be coming up in a little bit. You won't want to miss that. First, though, as always, we're going to kind of go top news of the week. Not as chaotic as some other weeks, of course. Always transfer rumors. Transfers always happening. Most recent high-profile one is where we're going to start, and that is Sadio Mane. Officially a Bayern Munich player as of Wednesday morning, this morning. It was rumored for a while. He made it clear he was going to leave Liverpool. It seemed like Bayern was only ever going to be the destination, but now it is official. He was there with his jersey ready to go. He leaves Liverpool with, of course, way more than this, but 90 Premier League goals, 24 Champions League goals in his 6 seasons at Anfield, and will go down as one of the Liverpool greats, not only because of the numbers he put up and the trophies he won, but because of his role in this Liverpool era. Choosing to go a different direction and to pursue something else at this point leaves his legacy as a complicated one, because that's where Liverpool's at right now in terms of how good this team has been and the trophies they have to show for it. I've talked about this before of how do you sort of make sense of all of this, and you can spin it just about any way you want. Of if Manchester City wasn't there, look at what they would have, or this is all they do have, and they were shootouts away from no trophies this year after losing a Champions League final and coming up just short in the Premier League. So you can look at it any way you want. Mane's not going to have an opportunity to go win a treble or a double or something that next season that might change that discussion. But the reality is this is one of the best Liverpool eras of all time. I don't view them in the context of, or I very much do view them in the context of Manchester City. This is not just a really good team they're going up against. This is arguably the best team in Premier League history. Nobody is consistently putting up point totals that Manchester City has, which means there's a real case that this Liverpool team, this era, this edition, is at the very least a top 3 group in Premier League history. And Sadio Mane was a huge part of that. And nobody's ever going to be able to sort of separate him from this no matter what happens next, because he was there for the beginning of it to win the Premier League, got a Champions League. He is forever linked, and was very clear about the fact that he will be Liverpool. He said in one of his videos, "I'll be Liverpool's number 1 fan still." He just wanted a different opportunity, so he's going to get that at Bayern Munich. Mane is Bayern's 3rd signing of the summer, and I do want to highlight all 3 of them quickly because we haven't gotten a chance to talk about them, and it goes into a larger discussion about Bayern I find very interesting. The other 2, Ryan Gravenberch, young Dutch international from Ajax, excellent young player, very promising, going to be great. Talked about him as the potential breakout star for the Netherlands national team at the World Cup. And then the other one is Noussair Mazraoui, also from Ajax. Combined, these 3 players have 97 Champions League appearances. And it would be way more if you didn't have 2 guys in their early and mid-20s as part of this group. These are not your Darwin Nunez-esque or Luis Diaz-esque signings, just to pick a couple names that came to mind, where it's sort of going up to that next level. This is not that at all. Sorry about that. What Bayern has done is what Bayern had to do. Retool with players ready to contribute right away who will not be fazed by the expectations that come with being Bayern Munich in the Champions League. This is not about the Bundesliga. It never is about the Bundesliga for Bayern. But I talked about at the end of the season, in the European hierarchy, they are slipping, and they needed to do something. And so you bring in one of the more sought after young players in the world. Even if he doesn't play a key role right away, he's going to have a great future. And he is already a regular starter for a team that was awfully impressive in the Champions League last season. And you bring in another incredibly accomplished player who just happens to play the position that might be the biggest question mark on your team, and that is right back. Mazraoui has been underrated for a long time. He is an excellent player, loads of experience with Ajax. So he can absolutely just take that right back spot and relieve some headaches for Julian Nagelsmann. Then you can figure out how you want to structure the center backs. But if there's one spot I'm looking to fortify if I'm Bayern, it's that right back spot, and they've already done that. Going back to Mane for a second here. Robert Lewandowski was the only player on this team with more than 14 Bundesliga goals last season. Serge Gnabry had 14, Thomas Müller had 8. Now, Thomas Müller also had, I believe it was 18 assists. So this is not a question of other players producing. But the big unknown here is what happens with Lewandowski. Of course, he's not going to mess with Sadio Mane, and they're more than capable of playing with each other. But there's a real chance this becomes Sadio Mane's team, which is something we have never seen before. And probably part of the reason why he wanted to leave Liverpool. If Lewandowski leaves, I don't see a way in which Bayern are going to get a comparable replacement, if that even exists. They've already spent money on Mane and on Gravenberch. You can't just take what you're going to get for Lewandowski and go find something similar because it doesn't exist. So you're going to have to go put in the kind of money that Manchester City and Liverpool just spent on their strikers. I don't see Bayern doing that. Maybe this all gets resolved and Lewandowski stays until at least next summer. The way he's talking, doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So all of a sudden, you have the best team in Germany and potentially nobody to score 20-plus goals. Now, everybody's going to pick up a little bit of the slack. It's not like this team is short on goal-scoring options. But that is another part of this that I'm very curious about. Okay, so if Lewandowski leaves, what does this look like? And can Sadio Mane go score 25 league goals as the focal point of an attack? Potentially playing through the middle, as he has more recently at Liverpool when you wanted to get both Diaz and Salah on the field. He can. I'm not sure he will. It's a very, very interesting situation Bayern find themselves in here. So either this is, in my head, this signing is that extra world-class attacking talent to go get yourself back into that conversation with at least the Real Madrids of the world. But it may end up being this is the signing to try and stay afloat while we figure out what we're going to do at striker. And I really like what Borussia Dortmund have done this summer. Well, we'll get into a full Bundesliga preview later, but it makes a lot of sense why Bayern did this, and he could become much more valuable than the money they spent on him if he ends up having to be the primary goal scoring option and he can deliver. Last thing I want to say on Bayern, not necessarily related to Mane, but Alphonso Davies, Ryan Gravenberch, Jamal Musiala, Deo Upamecano. That is an incredible core of players who are, essentially U23s. The top-end talent is not where Bayern wants it right now. I get that, especially if Lewandowski leaves. But there are not many teams in the world that can go throw out 4 players who haven't even reached their primes yet, aren't 25, that have the quality of those 4 players. I mean, you're talking Barcelona can probably, maybe Real Madrid, and then the list gets pretty short. So this is very much transition Does Mane kind of become the stopgap between the Lewandowski area and whatever happens next? Are they able to hold on to Lewandowski? Time will tell. Regardless, I really like this move for Bayern. This is an opportunity for Mane to take his brand and his game to a whole nother level because he may end up having to be the guy. And I'm a huge fan of what Bayern have done this summer. Will it be enough to get them where they want to be? I'm not sure, but they are certainly better than they were at the end of the season. Jumping from transfer rumors to games on the field, had the first quarterfinal of the US Open Cup Tuesday night. And down go the LA Galaxy. Sacramento Republic outshoot the Galaxy 15-11, get a 2-1 win. Rodrigo Lopez scored in the 4th minute, his 4th goal of the tournament. That is the most of any player. Galaxy get a corner kick in the 18th, get an own goal to equalize, and then Luis Felipe takes a shot from distance that nobody closes down in the 70th minute that gets past Jonathan Klinsmann. Not a good moment for him. He absolutely should have gotten to that ball. Seemed a little late to react and just, yeah, there was some traffic. Maybe he didn't expect Felipe to shoot that. But that's got to be saved. Klinsmann didn't, and so here you go. First USL Championship team to make the semifinals since FC Cincinnati in 2017. You very well may remember that and kind of how that became the propelling force for the move to MLS. And here we are, Sacramento just did the exact same thing. And it's not like this was a bad team the LA Galaxy put out. Chicharito came on in the second half. You had plenty of attacking talent on the field. It wasn't a bunch of second stringers and third stringers in a C squad by any means. And when you go win in El Tráfico to get to the quarters, you can't afford to put out a C squad. Which Greg Vanney absolutely took this seriously. Maybe the players not so much, and you heard some of that from the Sacramento Republic. I saw at least one player saying it just didn't seem like they were taking us very seriously. To me, that's on the players, because Greg Vanney put out a team that absolutely should have won this game. And so you go from winning El Tráfico, that was kind of framed as this is a great opportunity for both of these teams to go get a trophy. They got to go through each other to do it. And then you lay a dud and get outplayed by a USL Championship team. This was absolutely a deserved victory for Sacramento. Good for them. This is exactly what the US Open Cup is all about. This is why it's so special. And let's have more of this USL League One, USL Championship, really good performances against MLS teams, please. The more teams show up and perform like this, the more they get that national attention, raises the profile of those leagues, raises the profile of soccer in this country. MLS is not the only league where high-level soccer is played in the United States. Sometimes we forget that. Sacramento Republic just gave us another friendly and a very loud reminder. Your other quarterfinal games, that was the only one to happen last night. Tonight, Wednesday night, New York Red Bulls host NYCFC, Hudson River Derby, and then Sporting Kansas City host Union Omaha. And then your fourth quarterfinal, Orlando hosting Nashville, is actually next Wednesday. So you had one last night, two tonight, one a week from today. And Sacramento Republic is going to get the winner of Sporting Kansas City Union Omaha. So you're either getting a Sporting Kansas City team that has been very poor throughout the MLS regular season and is without two designated players, or you're getting a team in a league below you. We could have a Union Omaha Sacramento Republic semifinal for a spot in the U.S. Open Cup final, which would be absolutely phenomenal. So it's definitely worth paying attention to these games, how these final three quarterfinals play out, semifinals. We're going to have great storylines. We've got our second great rivalry game already. And for Sporting Kansas City, this is a way to salvage your season potentially. It's not quite over yet when it comes to MLS playoffs, but there's just only so much you can do when you lost 2 DPs, including your goal scorer. But they have been really good in this tournament historically. So that's it. That's a fascinating matchup. Again, Union Omaha is the opponent from USL League One, and we'll see how this goes. But every single round this tournament has delivered. It's why I love it so much, and hopefully this helps get a little bit more attention, some more eyeballs on it, so people are more invested, because this really should be a huge deal, and it's just not quite there yet. Staying in MLS and talking about huge deals, had our other big signing of the week in the form of Cucho Hernandez joining the Columbus Crew. Now, the secondary transfer window for Major League Soccer doesn't open until July 7th, so that's when they can actually register him and add him to the roster, so that was worth pointing out. But this is a guy who just turned 23. He has signed through 2025, the end of the 2025 season. And he has played for 3 teams in La Liga and Watford in the Premier League. 11 goals, 7 assists in 79 La Liga appearances with Huesca, Mallorca, and Getafe. 5 goals, 2 assists in 25 appearances. 11 of those were starts for Watford in the Premier League last season. It's a record transfer fee, as it should be, because Columbus was fighting Premier League teams, maybe some championship teams, major teams in major European leagues for Cucho Hernandez's services. This was not a guy who was looking to take a step down, or who wasn't able to cut it at the highest level. And Columbus was able to convince him to come. And so now you have what should be a prolific goal scorer in this league. And again, he is only 23. So you go through the end of the contract. If you sell him in 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to make a boatload of money, because he's already proven he's a proven goal scorer, not at an incredible rate. But go watch his highlights from Watford this season. This guy is remarkably talented. So you've got the added benefit of his value is only theoretically going to go up as he plays for your team as well, because again, he just turned 23. So this is his opportunity to become a star, to be the guy, and then hopefully turn that into a higher profile move in Europe. And this is the guy Caleb Porter has been going after, the guy being a general term for this kind of player for a while now. This is the one spot the Crew just have not gotten what they've wanted from. It's the reason they were willing to trade Gyasi Zardes. It was always going toward we're going to go spend our money on a number 9 and give ourselves a focal point in this attack. Miguel Berry was averaging 0.20 goals per 90 minutes as the primary striker for most of the season. That's not going to cut it. And then Eric Hurtado got some opportunities because Berry was struggling. He's been terrific in those limited opportunities. But I'm going to ask the same question I did at the end of the Columbus Crew section in my power rankings on Substack. Is Eric Hurtado the guy? Is that the solution to this problem? A helpful player in MLS, contributor, never a go-to goal scorer for his team, more of a guy that comes off the bench for most of his MLS career. Again, he's been very good in the limited opportunities. He's taken them and run with them. Good for you, Eric Hurtado. He's absolutely got a role to play here. And he's going to probably get a couple opportunities until Cucho Hernandez is ready to go. But if you're expecting Eric Hurtado to be the guy to lift your team into the playoffs, I just don't see it happening. I don't think Caleb Porter does either, which is why they just went and finally got their striker. So now all of a sudden, you have Cucho Hernandez, Lucas Elrayon, Derek Etienne has been very good as sort of your secondary playmaker, secondary goal scorer, and Darlington Nagbe. A very good goalkeeper in Eloy Room. I have always believed in this team and certainly believe in them now. When they won MLS Cup, I was consistent from start to finish. Well, not the start of the season. But once we got going, it was clear Columbus Crew were the best team in the league. Nagbe got hurt, so they weren't at full strength for a while there. You could see the disparity between when he played and when he didn't. And then they didn't have him for MLS Cup, but they still thrashed the Sounders anyway. That was so clearly the best team in the league. And the core of that team is still in place. And now you just added one of the best, most talented, most proven, most impressive resumes of any player in MLS. They got some work to do to get where they want to be. And, of course, this is not just about this season. This is about 2023 and beyond. But I will never stop believing in that midfield. And the idea of Zelarayan getting to feed Cucho Hernandez is tantalizing. This is, to me, a home run that transforms the Eastern Conference standings. They're not going to go finish up at the top. I don't see them getting anywhere close to NYCFC. Probably not the Red Bulls. Probably not Philly. I mean, it's going to take a little time for this to click, and maybe it doesn't click till next year. But all of a sudden, I'm looking at the Columbus Crew as potentially the team nobody is going to want to play come playoff time if they find a way to get in there. Similar to sort of Wayne Rooney's DC United kind of thing. Or, New England Revolution when Carlos Hill was hurt for most of that season. 2 years ago. I believe they made the Eastern Conference final. That's what we're talking about here. And it also says something about MLS that Columbus was able to make this happen. This wasn't LAFC, this wasn't the Galaxy, this wasn't the Sounders, this wasn't Inter Miami, this wasn't the Red Bulls, this wasn't NYCFC, it was the Columbus Crew. These are the kind of moves that take MLS to another level. And it says something about the league that a player of Cucho Hernandez's pedigree and position in his career was willing to make this move. Because again, there was plenty of interest in Europe, and he chose to come to Columbus. We'll see how this goes. Very, very excited to see him play, and to me, this might end up being the most impactful signing any MLS team makes in the 2022 season, including the off-season heading into this year. Basically, they're the most important, impactful addition to a team for the 2022 season. I really think this could make that much of an impact. Maybe I'm overhyping it a little bit. We haven't actually seen it yet, but this is the piece that was missing for this team. They didn't just fill the hole. They filled the hole and then plenty more with Cucho Hernandez. All right, we're going to take our first break real quickly here. When we come back, our interview with the Tennesseans, Drake Hills, talking plenty of U.S. men's national team, a little bit of MLS broadcast deal with Apple, a little bit of World Cup host sites for 2026, sort of a nice overview of all of the recent developments in U.S. soccer. You definitely will not want to miss that. You're watching the Touchline Talk Show. And welcome back to the Touchline Talk Show. As promised, our interview with Drake Hills. Really enjoyed talking to Drake. We got a nice sort of overview of everything going on. As the soccer reporter for the Tennessean, of course, focused on Nashville SC, but also the entire U.S. soccer landscape. So, plenty of conversation about where this U.S. men's national team stands heading into these final two World Cup tune-ups in September. We now know the opponents, so we talked about that. Drake's thoughts on the goalkeeping situation, the number 9 situation, and kind of what he saw, his big takeaways, his lessons learned from these 4 games the team just played. And then a little bit of his thoughts on the broadcast side of things, moving to Apple TV for Major League Soccer. And then also, was he surprised at the way the host sites played out for 2026 and the World Cup coming to the United States? And Nashville was one of the teams that got left out. So we also talked to Drake about specifically sort of what went wrong, what he thinks Nashville could have done differently, what ended up kind of potentially making the difference. It's something he covered extensively at the Tennessean, so he was able to provide great insight there as well. Without further ado, here is our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today, Drake. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Josh, for having me. I'm doing pretty good. Obviously, lots of soccer going on, so trying to stay on top of it.
Yeah, there's way too much. You feel like international break, time to breathe. No, not really. So, and that's where I want to start. Obviously, we just finished this extended, important window for the U.S. men's national team heading into the World Cup later this year. For you, it was kind of a weird window where you put a couple fellow World Cup opponents, and then you went into the CONCACAF Nations League, which gives you muddy fields in El Salvador and just a completely different context. What were the biggest lessons or things you feel like you learned about this team in this set of 4 games?
Yeah, so specifically talking about the U.S. men's national team's involvement and their debut in the Nations League this go around, obviously winning it its inaugural year last year. A couple of things. So one was obviously a desperate update for form up front. So you're talking about the center forwards, Jesus Ferreira, talking about Haji Wright getting a call for the first time in a long time. Obviously, based off of merit due to his goal scoring form in the club level, but really almost like a reintroduction for Haji at the international level. So that was certainly a question. Of course, getting a chance to see a healthy Weston McKennie once again after having a surgery, but also recovering from that foot issue with Juventus, and then also taking a look at what's going on and is it Ethan Horvath? Is it Matt Turner? I mean, what's going on here? So to be included in the World Cup group. So that's what was on the ground. That's the first point I wanted to make, was those 3 sub points of a major point, which was plugging in holes for a World Cup starting 11. But the second point I wanted to make was, if you take a look at preparation, right? You take a look at the competition level that the national team was playing in the Nations League. You've got Grenada and you've got El Salvador. One was against a team who is 170th in the world according to FIFA rankings and doesn't really have much value in that regard to test the U.S. But it was a chance to see a lot of those players in what was really a tough environment, not necessarily the physical Austin, Texas environment. They're playing on home soil. It is technically their send-off for the World Cup, but it's more about the fact that you have a lot of the group coming in after a very tough European cycle. Chris Pulisic, Tyler Adams, a lot of these guys, Weston McKennie, a lot of these European-based guys who are coming off of a very tough season without much rest. And so it's tough to maybe incorporate them with the MLS-based players, the Jordan Morrises, the Aaron Longs, those guys who are obviously in the prime time of their MLS season. So taking a look at how those guys would mesh in a very awkward setup with like I said, Grenada and El Salvador, and El Salvador playing on a what looked like to be a 9 and under recreational park type of field. So it's good. You never want to lose, and U.S. was able, and Jordan Morris was able to get the U.S. out of a bad situation in El Salvador. But that was something interesting to look at, which is the types of teams that they were playing, knowing that there's only going to be 2 more games in the September window before you actually have to begin World Cup preparations in November once you touch down in Qatar. So I think that's something that when you look at the September window, you really need to remind yourself about what happened, who stood out in this June window, and how could they make their case for a World Cup spot.
Were there players in particular that caught your attention? We saw primarily something close to what seems like it's going to be a starting 11. You saw the key players get a lot of minutes, but was there a player or two that you think really helped their stock to the extent that you can do that with so many spots in that starting 11? It feels like kind of solidified. Obviously, a couple are still up for grabs.
Yeah, I'm not sure about solidified, but I do think confirmation. And talking about those players who had some legit stock, but maybe hadn't proven themselves of a longer period. 2 players I think about is in the midfield. First, Luca De La Toure, someone who is obviously going to be moving this summer after Heracles was relegated in the Dutch division. That's someone who I think at the national level, you take a look at what happened in the January-February window with playing against El Salvador in World Cup qualifying. I think Luca De La Toure in that window had a very strong camp, had a very strong window, and going into this, obviously he did well in the March window as well, but obviously this time around, I think third time's a charm. I think that he's someone who has a legit chance, regardless of how potential injuries or not, how he stack up. He is proven himself to be a legit contributor to this national team and to the midfield. A second is his partner in midfield, and Yunus Musa, someone who is pretty new, by compared to Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams, who we in the media have been able to watch them since they basically stepped onto the scene in early 2018. So I think he is someone who has the ability to be a attacking-minded player who has defensive capabilities. I think he is the hybrid between Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie. Weston being the guy who can really go forward and make stuff happen, and Tyler being that legit out-and-out midfielder at the number 6 role. So I like Yunus Musa. He is technically probably best of that bunch. Just the way he moves with the ball, and to couple that with his physicality is impressive. I think that Jesus Ferreira had something to say about his role in the national team and this question going into the September window about who is the starting number 9 for this team. And lastly, I honestly think that Aaron Long has the chance, without Miles Robinson due to his Achilles, he has something to say about partnering with Walker Zimmerman in central defense.
And I wanted to mention them, and obviously they were sort of the 2 headlines in terms of uncertainty, very top number 9 position, and the back goalkeeping. Starting with Ferreira and the number 9, at one point in this window, it kind of looked like this might be slipping away from him because he had some opportunities he didn't take, and then all of a sudden he scores 4 goals, and we're having a different conversation again because Greg Berhalter gave him a 3rd chance, and he took full advantage of it. Do you feel like going into these 2 games in September, going into the final look at this team before the World Cup, he is the guy sort of in the pole position for that number 9 spot, or do you think this is still wide open and club form? Greg Berhalter's talked about this, that whoever's scoring goals is going to get an opportunity. Do you feel like this is a very open field, or do you feel like it's Ferreira's to lose at this point?
No, it's definitely an open field. It's still an open field, obviously, with a tough relegation battle with Augsburg. Pep is obviously still in that situation, and in that consideration pool, you can't really rule out what you're going to get from Jordan Pefok, although I know and it seems that he's a little bit down the pecking order, especially given Ferreira's form right now. And if Jesus continues to score throughout the MLS season into the end of the calendar year, inching towards the World Cup, it really helps his chances. And so, and then quite honestly, it's something that I haven't personally ruled out is like, let's consider Tim Weah as a central forward option, albeit he is a very good winger. He's shown against likes of Costa Rica and Jamaica in qualifying that he is someone who can offer you goals and offer and create chances off the right wing. But given how the national team is and the status in center forward, I think he is someone who you have to consider for that role too.
And then the goalkeeper situation, and specifically, I guess two parts. One, if you're Greg Berhalter, World Cup starts tomorrow. Who are you putting in net? And two, what is your concern level with what it looks like is going to be a situation where, like for this sort of second half of World Cup qualifying, the three guys who have played the primary role likely are going to start the season as backups for their European teams. Sean Johnson has obviously had a really good performance and is playing well for NYCFC. So he looks like he might be the only one of these four guys we're talking about that's actually going to be playing consistent minutes. Where is your concern level on that part of it? And then also, who's your number one right
now? Yeah, if I'm Greg Berhalter, it's going to be Matt Turner. And I have gone from Zach Steffen to Matt Turner, but I didn't like what I saw from Zach in the March window. I thought he had a couple of mistakes, a couple of close ones, notably that one very close save where he did basically save. He technically saved the ball against Chucky Lozano. I believe that was the first half of that game at Azteca. And it was crowd with a penalty. It seemed that their feet got caught up, with each other during that close save. But just the sharpness, I have a question about Zach and where he fits in terms of form, like you mentioned, because he's not going to be playing at Man City. And so a loan move would be very ideal to start the window in the summer window. I mean, and so it's not like Matt Turner is going to be playing much at Arsenal either. And it's kind of weird how Matt, with the way things ended with New England over the weekend, I'm very curious to see where his head is at and what he plans to do in fall with Arsenal. So those are two guys who I think Zach's got to get a loan move. But I still think that if I'm Greg Berhalter right now, I'm going to pick Matt Turner. And yes, very concerning when it comes to the fact that only Sean Johnson in that three-person group is probably going to be the only person playing. And Ethan Horvath, it's unfortunate he looks to be on the outside looking in. But yeah, in terms of form, Sean Johnson will likely be the best in form because he's playing every game for NYCFC.
And then finally, you mentioned the window. We now know who these opponents are going to be in these final two tune-up games in Europe. What do you want to see? Is there something you feel like Greg Berhalter can really figure out in these two games that are still, a little bit before he's making decisions about who he's going to throw out there against Wales in the end of November? But what are you kind of hoping to see? What do you think the team can get out of these final two games against quality opposition?
Yeah, quality oppositions, notably, obviously Saudi Arabia, although a lot of folks are trying to equate them to playing style-wise, stylistically speaking, trying to compare them to Iran. But I do have more of an eye for the U.S. going up against Japan a couple of days before that. So, I think it's quality that I'm looking for, especially up front. The likes of, as I would expect Ricardo Pepi to be in that, more of a European-based team. Pepi coming back in. I think, looking at players like Matt Turner, getting some minutes in with the national team, and obviously Zach Steffen as well. Taking a look at, is Haji Wright going to get another chance or not? Is Greg Berhalter was very critical of him after the El Salvador game, saying that he didn't take advantage of his chance, and it was disappointing to him the way he played, which I thought personally was kind of harsh, given. And I know the conditions is a low-hanging fruit here, but the chances that they, or the lack thereof that they created in the first half against El Salvador, I don't think Haji is to be blamed for that. However, he did have a couple opportunities where he shot one over the bar, and that's that on that. But I think there's going to be those kind of proof battles going on, not necessarily between player and player, but between player and coach, trying to prove to Greg Berhalter that they belong in the discussion for who is going to be on this roster come November.
And obviously, we've had plenty of domestic news, MLS related, World Cup related as well. I want to get to the World Cup in a second, but real quick, MLS broadcast moving to Apple TV starting next year. This is very different than the MLS broadcast setup as we know. What are your thoughts? Kind of what are you hearing? How are people reacting to this idea that it's all there and it's all behind a paywall and it's Apple TV and you're done with local broadcasts and this is just a very different approach MLS is taking.
Yeah, I think you said it in your question there that the biggest public outcry right now is the ridding of local broadcasts, and the fact that although it's very clear, and anyone who's watched enough MLS can say that not every MLS broadcast on the local level is equal. I think there's a lot of broadcasts who are a little more sharp. You take a look at Bally Sports South with Atlanta. I think Nashville has a really good broadcast. House with Tony Hudson and Jimmy Watson as their duo. I think that if you go out west, I think there's a pretty good broadcast with out there in Denver with Altitude Sports with Connor Cape and a lot of those guys. And Minnesota is another good one that I think is pretty decent. And there's going to be some analysts who are basically in and around, right? Charlie Davis does stuff with Paramount Plus, but he's with the New England Revolution broadcast team. If you've got Max Bretos, you've got Adrian Healy, some of these guys who were once on the network side but have gone into the club sides. I mean, with Adrian Healy doing great things in Austin, I think it's tough, with Mike LaHood there as well. I forgot to mention as an analyst, it's tough because there's a lot of talent that you got to ask what's going to happen with a lot of that talent going into this new app. Another thing is we don't know the prices right now. We don't know what the subscription fees will be. Don't know how this will happen and experience what the experience will be in real time. Having to go into Apple TV, then to go within Apple TV to get to the MLS app. There's a lot of things going on, but I want to say one strong thing I think to help MLS is they're centralizing production. So they're going to have the entire, front of house, back of house, all under the MLS team, and I think that's going to be something that gives them a lot more strength, a lot more consistency. And I love the idea of a whip around show. I mean, take a look at not just the what's going on in the soccer world with the Golazo show, obviously with Champions League and Europa League, but take a look at NFL Red Zone. I think that's the best comparison in American sports, and I think the really the only comparison at this level. The only difference is that this won't be on linear television. You can't subscribe on Spectrum or Comcast or DirecTV, whatever you have. You can't go through that to find a MLS network like you have with NFL Network. You have to essentially have a smart TV or a tablet or some sort of smart device that will get you there. So, but the reality is when you take a look at that and you take a look at the numbers, like just going back to the Nashville SC Sporting Kansas City game on Juneteenth, 88,000 off the cable. And there's a bit of inconsistency because over 400,000 watched LA Galaxy. I believe that was that Portland or Seattle?
Portland, yeah.
It was Portland on ESPN and ESPN Deportes. Those two numbers combined were over 400,000. So there's some inconsistency with the cable numbers. So I don't blame MLS going this route, making everything central, not just the production itself, but also subscribers and bringing in content around that, not just on game days. Gary Stevenson, deputy commissioner for MLS, said that there will be eventually content that's pushed through Apple News, that's pushed through other other Apple outlets, in which fans can engage with that content on a regular, daily basis. And player from Colombia, let's say he's a youth national team or a young Colombian national team player who's playing in Europe or playing in South America, and he signs, let's say, for Columbus Crew. Now you've got pretty much his entire following from Colombia and his team potentially in Europe or in South America going to your site, going to your app, going to your content to figure out what is Columbus Crew, trying to familiarize themselves with his new digs. And I think from MLS and Apple standpoint, that's what you want.
And then the other big news we've had here, World Cup 2026 bids. You were obviously very closely covering all of the efforts in Nashville. Generally, how surprised were you about the cities that actually did get the World Cup, get to be host sites? Share your overall thoughts there. And then on the Nashville side specifically, do you feel like there's something Nashville could have done differently, better? I know you broke this down and sort of talked about the reasons why Nashville ended up not getting a bid, but do you feel like there's something that the city should have done, or it just kind of ended up in this unfortunate situation where you had all of these huge metropolitan areas on the coast that ended up getting it there and kind of left the Midwest scrambling for a spot or two potentially?
First off, DC/Baltimore being snubbed in lieu for and in preference for Boston is probably the biggest surprise in general. The fact that there are going to be thousands of people having to drive to Foxborough, Massachusetts, and Gillette Stadium to go watch some of the best players in the world play in a World Cup, as opposed to going to, historically speaking, and the efforts and the culture and the pedigree that has been Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, is pretty sad when you take a look at the landscape and really the attention. D.C. has led, numbers-wise, has led the United States in viewers watching the English Premier League on NBC. So to see that market completely be left out of the 2026 World Cup is the biggest surprise. Going to the Nashville side, I think it's not so much a surprise. When you take a look at the fact that in that central region, Kansas City had the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and that entire group, as well as local government being on board with this bid. You do not see that at Nashville. There's not a Roman Yossi, there's not a Pecorine, a Derrick Henry, a Ryan Tannehill. There's not even a Taylor Lewan, right? There's no one from Broadway or country music, R&B, hip hop that is based or is rooted in Nashville that jumped on this marketing wise. And so the fact that Nashville bid was really very much a workman's bid, and I'll get to the technical side in a moment, but the marketing side, you really think that, I think that was a big mistake to not have those trying to garner buzz and to garner interest and popularity with the community based off of the influencers, the grassroots influencers of the city. That's going to be a mistake that will be haunting Nashville and its committee members as we inch closer and closer to the World Cup. But on the technical side, it was detrimental. And, considering what Nashville did in terms of revealing plans for a new closed air stadium going in 2026, after FIFA had visited Nashville September of last year, the planes didn't come until late February this year. And so I think that disrupted the familiarity and the confidence that FIFA had in Nissan Stadium. And the fact that talking with the Titans and with those from the committee told me that FIFA told the committee that essentially Nissan Stadium is the best or one of the best NFL stadiums built for FIFA soccer, FIFA sanctioned soccer events. And so, yes, they would have had to knock out all four corners of the stadium, the seats and everything. They would have had to have overhauls and VIP and hospitality areas. And then, of course, and potentially would have had to build almost 2,000 covered media seats, not just written media, but audio and radio and broadcast media as well. That is something that really could have been done, and we could potentially be looking at Nashville having a bid. Um, and so I think those two things really hurt Nashville in terms of going up against the Kansas Cities of the world.
And thanks again to Drake for taking the time to talk to us earlier this week. Be sure to check out all of the great work he is doing at the Tennessean. You can also follow him on social media. We do have a little bit more of that interview we did not show you today during the show. That will be exclusively for paid subscribers on Substack. So be sure to sign up. Again, paid subscription. We're going to save some exclusive interviews for there. So what Drake and I didn't talk about in this part of the conversation was Nashville SC, kind of his thoughts on where they are this season, Geodis Park with the new stadium opening, and what they need to do to take the next level in the playoffs. So be sure to go to Substack, touchlinetalk.substack.com, become a paid subscriber to see the rest of this interview. We're going to take a quick break, our final break, and then when we come back, as always, our weekend look ahead, breaking down some of the biggest games coming up over the weekend. You're watching the Touchline Talk Show. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back one final time to the Touchline Talk Show. It is that time of the week for the weekend look ahead. MLS heavy with NWSL on the international break. Friday night, Orlando City at FC Cincinnati. Both teams coming off really good performances. Orlando picking up a win. Cincinnati getting a draw against the Union, in which they played very, very well. Could have had all 3 points. Fourth in the East versus eighth in the East. Cincinnati is right there in this playoff conversation, trying to pick up 3 points at home, get back over that line and into the playoffs. Saturday, FC Dallas at Austin. Of course, 2 Texas teams. Dallas coming off of a home loss to Vancouver and go travel to LAFC next. So you've got this game on the road, followed by Banc of California Stadium. This is 3rd versus 4th in the West currently. And this is a big one for Dallas for that very reason. You just had a not-so-great home loss. And now you're going into one of the most difficult environments in MLS next week. And this one is not easy either. If you lose 3 in a row, all of a sudden you're going from a team in sort of that 2 to 3 range up at the top of the West to a team in the middle of all of these, sort of the jumbled mush fighting for playoff spots and home field advantage in the first round and things like that. So this is a big one for Dallas to at least get a point somewhere in here and stop this from going into LAFC looking at the potential of a 3-game losing streak. 2 big games Sunday. New York Red Bulls at LAFC, speaking of Banc of California Stadium. We got number 1 in the West, number 2 in the East. LAFC, of course, coming off that draw with Seattle. And the New York Red Bulls did what they were supposed to and beat Toronto. All of a sudden, the Red Bulls are hanging in there for the primary reason, which we'll get to in a second, about Philadelphia Union. But this is a real chance to. We'll see what happens. Open Cup tonight, but this is sort of like Dallas. This could swing a couple ways here for the Red Bulls. You beat NYCFC to get to the Open Cup semifinals. You get at least a point on the road. You're feeling really good about yourself. You lose in the Open Cup. You lose this game. All of a sudden, different story. So a big, big week for the Red Bulls. Our final MLS game, NYCFC at Philadelphia Union. 1st in the East versus 3rd in the East, also Sunday. Both of these teams, long unbeaten streaks. NYCFC's is 9, Philadelphia Union's is 8. The problem is the Union have drawn 7 of those 8 games. They had 6 of 7 coming in. I mentioned they drew Cincinnati to come out of the international break, which is how the Red Bulls ended up in second place, because drawing every week just doesn't do all that much for you when you're near the top of the standings trying to compete with the best of the best. Union got to find a way to get 3 points at home. In a vacuum, a draw is fine, but you put yourself in a hole now as you're trying to chase NYCFC. So to make sure this thing is to prevent this thing from getting out of hand, got to find a way to get some wins. And snapping a 9-game unbeaten streak for NYCFC would be a nice little added benefit there for Philadelphia. Finally, also wanted to acknowledge U.S. Women's National Team in camp now ahead of this long qualifying tournament in Mexico, but before they go down to qualify potentially for both the Olympics and the World Cup, they're playing Colombia twice to sort of get into the swing of things as tune-up games before the tournament. First one of those is Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Of course, this is a loaded squad. This is the A team for Vlatko Adanovsky. Most of your big names are there. Kristen Press was the controversial. It then, unfortunately, became not controversial when she announced she tore her ACL, but she was sort of the big name that was going to get left off anyway, according to Adanovsky. But this is Alex Morgan is scoring goals at a ridiculous rate. Can that translate? You've got all your Megan Rapinos, your Rose Lavelle's. Everybody is there. So you got these 2 tune-up games against Colombia, and then the stakes get incredibly high because you're trying to qualify for 2 major tournaments through this one tournament in Mexico. So again, Colombia, Part 1, Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That is all for the show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our content. Also subscribe on Substack. Follow Touchline Talk on social media too. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week.